This is Mac OS Ken.
Sound and Fury and Apple Vision Pro orders, OS updates for all the Apple things, and a creepy Constellation approaches. It is Tuesday, the 23rd of January, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. TF International analyst Ming-Chi has guesstimates on how many orders Apple took for Apple Vision Pro over the weekend. The analyst hit medium with his thoughts on Monday, which seemed to boil down to, Yes, the device sold out quickly, but that was to be expected. Yes, waits have extended to 5 to 7 weeks out, also to be expected. But they got to 5 to 7 weeks out and stayed there, according to the analyst. In that, he seemed to see cause for concern. It indicates that demand may quickly taper off after the core fans and heavy users place their orders, in his estimation. The analyst compares orders for Apple's headset to orders for a new model of iPhone. Quoting his post, "Popular iPhone models also sell out immediately upon pre-order, and shipping times typically increase to several weeks within hours. However, unlike Vision Pro, iPhone models usually continue to see a steady increase in shipping times 24 to 48 hours after pre-orders open, indicating that demand continues to grow even after the initial sold out." Well, sure, but iPhone also has carrier promotions and advertising coming from all sides. Additionally, even the most expensive iPhone is less than half the price of Apple Vision Pro. And finally, people know what to do with an iPhone. It's going to be a minute or two before uses for Vision Pro come into focus. See what I did there? As for how many orders he thinks Apple processed, he's thinking 160 to 180,000 units. The analyst says achieving a shipment volume of 500,000 units for Vision Pro this year should not be challenging. However, because demand tapers off quickly after the initial sold out, it's critical to closely monitor demand in other markets and application updates to assess changes in demand. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I feel the need to bring up one point. Remember late last year when orders for iPhone 15 Pro Max were showing as late as early December, then ended up shipping in mid-November? Or when orders for the first Apple Watch quickly slipped to 3 weeks after launch day, then ended up shipping on launch day? I know Ming-Chi is better connected to the supply chain than I am, but it seems people outside of Apple can't know for certain what's going on inside Apple. Nothing about opening weekend orders speaks to the ultimate success or failure of Apple and mixed reality. Thinking along a similar line regarding Weekend 1 and ultimate success or failure is JP Morgan analyst Samik Chatterjee. Apple 3.0 ran part of a note he wrote, "Yes, the device sold out quickly, but that was to be expected. Yes, waits have extended to 5 to 7 weeks out, also to be expected. However," wrote the chatterbox, "the focus on lead times in the case of Vision Pro is misplaced, and we expect the focus should be on the consumer feedback on the experience of the device, as well as the supply chain feedback on plans for the next generation Vision Pro 2, as volume and revenue implications are more likely to ramp materially with future generations of the product." He does not see positioning iPhone and Vision Pro as an apples-to-apples comparison. See what I did there? What he says, while there is typically a 2-week lead time between orders and shipping times for the iPhones in the fall, as well as for the Vision Pro in this case, the familiarity of the customer with iPhones and their experience is very different relative to the Vision Pro. Apparently assuming the same 500,000 units this year as Ming-Chi he figures Apple Vision Pro will generate revenue in the $2 billion range for fiscal year 24. Really, though, he's listening for user reaction and supply chain chatter. Mr. Chatterjee has an overweight rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $225. It was a day earlier than many expected, but Apple hit with this week's previously announced cavalcade of OS updates on Monday. Mac Rumors ran a number of reports Monday, letting the world know of the releases of iOS and iPadOS 17.3, along with the release of macOS Sonoma 14.3, watchOS 10.3, tvOS 17.3, and version 17.3 of the software for HomePod. New for iOS and iPadOS, stolen device protection comes to the iPhone. Apple says that increases security of iPhone and Apple ID by requiring Face ID or Touch ID with no passcode fallback to perform certain actions. Collaborative playlists finally work. Not only can you and your pals build and rebuild playlists, you can also react to individual tracks in a playlist with emoji. AirPlay Hotel support lets travelers stream to compatible in-room devices. Apple Care and Warranty in Settings shows your coverage for all devices signed in with your Apple ID, according to Apple. There are crash detection optimizations for all iPhone 14 and 15 models. And the iOS and iPadOS updates bring the new Unity wallpaper in celebration of Black History Month. Though it is not listed in the release notes, word on the street before Monday's updates was that the video wish lists for the iTunes Store would be back in play. You may remember that going away when Apple killed sales of movies and TV shows through the iTunes Store app with the release of iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS 17.2. Last Friday, Mac Rumors ran a piece saying that list had quietly returned to tvOS a few days after it was removed back in December. Then last week, people running the iOS and iPadOS release candidates had access to it in the iTunes Store apps for Apple's tablets and phones. There are also security fixes with these updates. Those include one for a WebKit vulnerability that may have been actively exploited, so you want to get that. Taking care of people whose devices can't or won't make the move to iOS 17.anything, the Cupertino company also released security updates in the forms of iOS and iPadOS 16.7.5, as well as iOS and iPadOS 15.8.1. They all address multiple vulnerabilities, including the potentially problematic WebKit one. Moving on to the Mac, macOS Sonoma 14.3 brings the same collaborative playlist changes mentioned in the iOS and iPadOS updates. It also brings the Apple Care and Warranty and Settings info, and it brings security fixes, including the WebKit vulnerability that Apple says may have been put to use by bad guys. As with the stay-behind iPhones and iPads, Apple released versions of macOS for machines that have not made their ways to Sonoma. Those come in the forms of macOS Ventura 13.6.4 and macOS Monterey 12.7.3. Each addresses multiple vulnerabilities, including the worrisome WebKit issue. Off now to the wrist, where Apple is installing watchOS 10.3. It comes with a new Unity Bloom watch face in celebration of Black History Month, plus improvements and bug fixes. All that and a number of security updates. If you'd like to know that number, count them yourself. To the TV room we go, where we find Apple updating Apple TV with tvOS 17.3. What's new? You are not cleared for that information. Well, not most of it. There are security updates, though, including a fix for the WebKit vulnerability that might have been actively exploited by ne'er-do-wells. We know even less about this week's HomePod update, just that it exists. Should update automatically, though. You can prod updates for specific HomePods along in the Home app on an associated iPhone or iPad. So I guess when Russia invaded Ukraine, I thought Apple was done with Russia. I guess there's done, and then there's done. A piece from Apple Insider says the Cupertino company has paid Russia over $13.5 million in an anti-steering App Store lawsuit. The suit in question predates the war in Ukraine. Maybe that has something to do with this being a thing. The report says the fine is a result of an October 2021 antitrust suit leveled against Apple. Russia's Federal Anti-Monopoly Service accused the company of blocking developers from connecting users to external payment options, also known as steering. Speaking of paying people, Apple is said to be incentivizing musicians with a little do-re-mi. 9to5Mac says Apple Music is trying to get artists into the whole spatial audio thing by paying extra for the format. The piece says spatial audio offers an immersive surround sound experience when listening with AirPods Pro, AirPods Max, and other headphones. According to the report, starting with this month's payouts, tracks in spatial audio will earn 10% more per play in royalties. What's sort of surprising is people don't have to listen in spatial audio for the plays to earn more. 9to5Mac explains the metric is calculated based on the proportion of spatial available to non-spatial available plays. So if an artist offers all of their music in spatial, i.e. using Dolby Atmos mastering, they will see the 10% royalty bonus even if no one actually listened to the spatial version. But if a spatial audio track drops and no one hears it drop, follow-up brain teaser, how many angels can fit on the dance floor? And finally today, something creepy this way comes. Apple TV Plus has dropped the first trailer for the Noomi Rapace, Jonathan Banks psychological thriller, Constellation. In a press release about the show, the video streamer explains, Constellation stars Rapace as Jo, an astronaut who returns to Earth after a disaster in space, only to discover that key pieces of her life seem to be missing. The action-packed space adventure is an exploration of the dark edges of human psychology and one woman's desperate quest to expose the truth about the hidden history of space travel and recover all that she has lost. See, they say that, but she comes back knowing how to play the piano, something she did not know how to do when she left the planet. I'm just looking for possible upsides here. The first 3 of 8 episodes hit Apple TV Plus on Wednesday, the 21st of February. They'll run one per week on subsequent Wednesdays through the 27th of March. You can catch the somewhat disturbing trailer on YouTube. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.